We begin with our big story. Hundreds of Americans escaping the violence in Gaza and crossing the Rafah border into Egypt. Among them are Aboud Akal, his partner Wafa Abu Zaida, and their one-year-old son Youssef. All are dual American Palestinian citizens who live in Massachusetts. Joining me now is Sammy Nabulsi. He is a lawyer representing the family. Sammy, thanks so much for joining us. And I have to ask, first off, how is the family doing now that they've made that crossing?
They're doing well, all things considered. I spoke to Aboud a little bit ago. Just as far as an update goes, they left Rafah crossing a few hours ago. It's about a 5-hour drive to get from Rafah to Cairo. They're probably anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes outside of Cairo now, so they're getting pretty close to their final destination, at least for the night. And they're safe, they're sound, they're physically and emotionally exhausted, probably emotionally more so than physically, is what Aboud told me. But they're just so grateful that they were able to get out of Gaza safely and hopefully very soon back to the United States.
Can you, Sammy, describe to us what you know about that process of getting through? We've seen people looking for their names, trying to understand if this is their time. Describe the process for this family as you know it.
Yeah, and frankly, I can understand the frustration with many people. Before today, just this family had about 4 false starts. And so it's never really been very clear what that process is like. But what the process was like over the last 24 hours is it started late last night here around 8:30 p.m. Eastern, which was about 2:30 a.m. over in Gaza. I saw that the Palestinian Customs Authority had published a list of foreign nationals that would be permitted to cross into Rafah today, November 2nd. When I saw that list, I pulled that list immediately. And as I looked through it, I noticed that the United States was on the list. The United States was not on the list yesterday, which was actually a really frustrating and deflating day for the family. And then I went down to the United States, and there their names were Wafa, Aboud, and Youssef. Aboud's sister Haneen and her 3 children who are also there, also American citizens who live in New Jersey, were on the list. And shortly after we shared that list with them, they were contacted by the State Department by email, text messages, and a phone call. And then we just worked to make sure we got them to the Rafah crossing before the 7 a.m. opening today. Once they got to the crossing, they waited a significant amount of time. I don't know if that was in line or just until the crossing actually opened, but they didn't get out of Gaza and into Egypt until 11:20 a.m. Gaza time, and then they had to go through significant processing in Egypt. But very fortunately, just a few hours ago, they boarded a shuttle to Cairo, and they're almost there now.
And we're looking at those photos of Youssef, 1-year-old, with the family. Do you feel like the family has the support that it needs now from the American government, that they have managed to escape from Gaza?
I think so. Aboud did message me earlier on WhatsApp when he was at the Rafah crossing, telling me that staff from the United States Consular Affairs was there. They were very kind. They were very helpful. I believe the U.S. Consular Affairs has provided the shuttle service that they are in, headed to Cairo. My hope is once they get there, Consular Affairs will work with them on travel arrangements if needed, and we get them home safely. I'm hopeful. I'm holding my breath until I see them here at Boston Logan Airport in Massachusetts, but it appears at least once they got through Rafah crossing, United States Consular Affairs has been very helpful and giving this family all the support that they can to get them home safely.
Will be such a welcome sight when they walk into that airport in Boston. Sammy, President Biden says that 74 additional dual nationals crossed into Egypt today. Is it your expectation now, based on what your experience has been with this family, that any American who wants to leave Gaza will be able to at this point?
I don't know. You know, as I said, something that's been really frustrating over the last few weeks, number one was what felt like a lack of prioritization of this issue. But then once it seemed that it was at least getting some lip service, we had a lot of false starts. And the other issue, of course, is that there are other parties here. This is all being coordinated in the midst of a complicated conflict that involves many countries, and I don't know. I'm hopeful. I was encouraged to see the Rafah crossing now opening 2 days in a row. That's significant, given that it hasn't opened in several weeks. And my hope is that this continues to happen every single day for the next few days until every American citizen that wishes to leave can exit safely and immediately.
Sammy Nabulsi, thanks so much for your time and explaining this to us tonight.
Of course, thank you for telling their story. I appreciate you.
Now let's bring the big story to our panel. Joining us today is ABC News contributor and former Assistant U.S. Attorney John Katko, ABC News political contributor and former Democratic Senator from North Dakota Heidi Heitkamp, ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist with the Los Angeles Times LZ Granderson, and NPR White House correspondent Asma Khalid. Heidi, I'm going to start with you. You heard Sammy's comments there. Do you think that the Biden administration is doing enough to get Americans out of Gaza right now?
Well, I know Tony Blinken pretty well, and I know the professionalism of the State Department, and I can assure you, unlike what you just heard, this is not lip service. I think that the State Department has prioritized because bringing Americans home, whether they're being held hostage or whether they are just caught in this conflict. And so, you know, everyone would love things to move faster than what they move, but I think that they are moving as fast as what they can. And I would put my faith in the State Department that eventually everyone who wants to leave Gaza, who's an American citizen, will be the highest priority for the State Department.
LZ, I'm going to go to you. One of the challenges we've heard has just been getting information in and out of Gaza. And you recently wrote about the struggles for journalists and getting this information out there, too. Talk about that.
People forget that, you know, just because journalists wear a flak jacket that says press or media on it doesn't mean that they're necessarily safe or they can't be harmed. And so they're risking their lives to get this information to us. And obviously, when you have situations like what happened in the hospital recently, in terms of who's bombing what, having journalists on the ground is important. Because we are your eyes and ears, and as the Constitution of the United States, we're also the defender of democracy. So it's important that journalists are on the ground, but keep in mind that being on the ground doesn't mean that you're safe, just like everyone else who are in Gaza.
Well, and so much of this has been that the focus on getting the aid into the people who need it in Gaza. Asma, we've heard so many calls for a ceasefire, and President Biden appeared to make some reference to a pause. Where is the president coming down on this right now?
Yeah, I mean, the White House has been clear that they are not calling for a full ceasefire. But yesterday at a campaign fundraiser, President Biden was interrupted by someone who was calling for a ceasefire. And the president says that he supports a pause that would presumably allow some hostage negotiations to occur and possibly also allowed aid in. This is a statement we've heard from a number of Biden officials in reference to a humanitarian pause. There's not a lot of clarity about what it would look like, how long it would last, what it would mean. That all being said, Elizabeth, I mean, I will say there are some voices within Congress, I think notably Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who today did come out and call for a ceasefire. You've also seen Senator Chris Murphy criticize sort of the extent of civilian casualties. I think one challenge for this White House moving forward is how long they can perhaps refrain from calling for a ceasefire as Democrats in Congress take that step and do call for a ceasefire.
And another challenge, Asma, is that the president is facing these plummeting poll numbers among some Arab Americans over his really staunch support for Israel and, you know, not calling directly for that ceasefire. What's been the White House's reaction to this, as it's, you know, clearly part of the president's reelection as he's looking ahead, too?
I mean, the White House certainly says that they don't make decisions on policy based on polling. But I will say I'm a longtime campaign and demographics reporter, and I think that, you know, no doubt Muslims, Arab Americans are a sliver of the overall electorate, and we are a year out from the election. But I will also say I have never seen such a monumental shift as we are currently seeing in some of the polling around where Arab American and Muslim voters are in such a short amount of time. I mean, this is really fundamentally unlike anything we've seen. You know, many Muslim voters were Republican prior to 2001, and around 2000, 2004, they shifted to the Democratic Party. The Muslim and Arab voters I'm talking to now say that they are potentially seeing a shift like that. That does not mean that they will vote for Republicans or necessarily support President Trump. But I do hear from people who say they potentially will sit out this next presidential election. One last thing I will say is, while I was saying that Muslim voters, Arab voters are, of course, a tiny fraction of the overall electorate, I will say in a state like Michigan, if the current poll numbers hold, it is very challenging for a Democrat to win a state like Michigan, given the sort of widespread frustration that Muslims have had. We are seeing the White House make some outreach efforts. Last week, they held a meeting with a handful of Muslim leaders, and they are trying to hear what some of those concerns are.
Great context. And John Kakko, I got to ask you one question about another issue boiling over here in Washington. We've heard Senator Tommy Tuberville basically block the confirmation of top military leaders now for months in the Senate. He opposes this Pentagon policy that reimburses staff to travel out of state for an abortion. And the White House is now kind of escalating its rhetoric, saying that this is putting U.S. military readiness at risk at this time that we are dealing with these conflicts overseas. Where do you think this ends, John Kakko?
Well, I can tell you that Tommy Tuberville is Exhibit A of the recalcitrants in modern politics in Washington. It's either his way or the highway. And if he doesn't get exactly what he wants, he's going to gum up the works for everything. That's not how our system is set up. We compromise every day in our personal lives. We compromise every day in our business dealings, and we're made to compromise in politics. And guys like Tommy Tuberville and those who took out Speaker McCarthy have a monolithic line of thinking where only their opinion counts. And that's not what this system's about. So I say shame on Tommy Tuberville for what he's doing, because he's not taking into consideration anyone's opinion but his own, and that's not politics.
Compromise, not a word we talk about a lot these days, as I know all of you know. John, Heidi, Elsie, and Asma, thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.